I stood there frozen, the scent of white roses still clinging to my dress as Sienna's words echoed in my ears. "You low-class, ugly old woman?" The chandeliers sparkled behind her like mock applause, each crystal glinting with cruelty. Somewhere in that room, my son was laughing, his arm around the woman who just gutted his mother in a whisper. After 30 years of raising him alone, after skipping meals to pay for his braces, after wiring my retirement to cover her wedding dreams, I wasn't a mother. I was a stain on her stage. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The reception lights glimmered off the chandeliers like bottled champagne. Joyce Monroe stood beside her son, Blake, her hand tucked neatly into the crook of his arm as they greeted guests. He looked radiant, his tucks pressed, smile effortless, the kind of happiness only love could sculpt. Joyce smiled too, even though her feet ached from a 12-hour day of helping with setup. She'd done hair for half the bridesmaids herself when the salon crew bailed. That's what moms did. Quietly fixed what needed fixing. "Mom, you good?" Blake asked between hugs and handshakes. "Perfect, sweetheart," she said, and meant it. Or at least she wanted to. The crowd around them pulsed with laughter and camera flashes. Champagne flutes clinked. The DJ started a soft melody that sounded too expensive to be genuine. Joyce excused herself for a moment, stepping toward the powder room for a breather. That's when Sienna appeared. White satin gown, high ponytail cascading like a movie star's. The girl looked flawless, every inch of her manicured to perfection. But her eyes had that mean sparkle Joyce had been trying to ignore since the engagement party. "Mrs. Monroe," Sienna hissed, voice low and sugary. "Can I have a quick word?" Joyce smiled politely, expecting some small wedding day panic about flowers or seating charts. "Of course, honey. Everything all right?" Sienna's smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked Joyce up and down, slowly, critically. "I'm embarrassed you showed up looking like this," she whispered. "You low-class, ugly old woman." The words landed like a slap. Joyce froze. The hallway hummed with the faint thud of bass from the dance floor, but her ears rang. Her pulse tripped over itself. She blinked once, twice, trying to process the venom in Sienna's voice. "Excuse me?" Joyce managed, her voice thin. Sienna's smirk deepened. "You heard me. You should have stayed home, or at least hired someone to help you dress. I mean, Blake's family deserves better optics than this." She flicked a manicured hand toward Joyce's dress, pale blue lace, tasteful, chosen carefully. Then Sienna turned on her heel, the hem of her gown whispering across the tile, and walked away. The faint scent of designer perfume lingered like smoke after a fire. For a few seconds, Joyce stood there, one hand gripping her clutch so tightly the beads pressed into her palm. She wanted to say something, anything. But the words wouldn't come. 61 years old, and this was the first time anyone had ever called her ugly to her face. She drew in a slow breath. Not here. Not tonight. When she stepped back into the reception hall, the noise hit her like a wave. Music, laughter, plates clinking. Blake was still surrounded by guests, his face lit up with joy. He had no idea his bride had just gutted his mother's heart behind the restrooms. Joyce straightened her shoulders. She slipped back into the crowd, smiling when people greeted her, thanking them for coming, posing for photos like nothing had happened. The mask held, barely. But Mimi noticed. Her best friend of 30 years could read her like a book. Mimi came up with 2 glasses of champagne and that skeptical brow that never missed a thing. "What did that girl say to you?" she asked quietly. Joyce shook her head, forcing a smile. "Nothing important." "Mm-hmm." Mimi's gaze slid toward Sienna, who was now laughing too loud at the head table, tossing her hair for the photographer. You sure about that? Joyce swallowed hard, her throat dry. It's her big day. Let her have it. Mimi didn't buy it, but she didn't push. Instead, she clinked her glass gently against Joyce's. You're classier than she'll ever be. Remember that. The words landed softly, but Joyce's chest still felt tight. She glanced toward Blake. He was beaming, hand on Sienna's back, completely unaware. As the band started another song, Joyce forced herself to sway with the rhythm, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, something had shifted. Something sharp and unyielding. She looked again at Sienna, who was whispering to one of her bridesmaids, eyes darting toward Joyce with an amused curl of her lip. That was the moment Joyce knew. This wasn't nerves or insecurity. This was cruelty, calculated and deliberate, and beneath her calm smile, something inside her quietly locked into place. A promise. She wouldn't strike tonight, but she would remember every word. The champagne bubbles had long gone flat by the time the limousines arrived. Joyce noticed them first, sleek black stretch cars gliding up the circular driveway like a small parade. She stood near the reception doors with Mimi, pretending to admire the floral arrangements, though her stomach hadn't unclenched since Sienna's words. Guests began whispering, phones discreetly lifted. Out stepped Sienna's family, a spectacle of wealth and noise. Women in fur stoles despite the Arizona heat, men in glimmering cufflinks and designer shoes that looked barely broken in. One woman tottered on rhinestone heels, clutching a champagne flute before even reaching the door. Ah, the Lanes! Daphne Kroll, the wedding planner, chirped with a smile that was 2 shades too bright. She clasped her clipboard to her chest, eyes flicking to Joyce in a silent, "Are these for real?" Joyce returned a polite nod and stayed quiet. Inside, the group announced themselves without needing to. "Did you see their limo?" One man boomed, voice coated in theatrical confidence. "Imported leather seats? Same model the Prince of Dubai rides in." Joyce's lips pressed into a small smile. Scottsdale wasn't exactly crawling with royalty. Another woman, dripping in costume jewelry that caught the chandelier light, laughed too loud. "We just love how quaint this place is. Reminds me of our vineyard in Napa." "Vineyard," Mimi murmured beside her. "They sound like they drink boxed wine on weeknights." Joyce tried to hide a smirk. Her eyes tracked the tall man introducing himself as Uncle Preston Lane. He looked nervous, scanning for cues before shaking hands. When a guest complimented the family's last name, he smiled uncertainly and said, "We're so proud of the, Lawn family." The mispronunciation hung awkwardly in the air. Mimi leaned close. "That one's tie still has a marshal's tag." Joyce followed her gaze. Sure enough, a small, shiny tag peeked from beneath the knot of his tie. "Maybe he plans to return it," she whispered. Mimi snorted into her drink. Classy. Meanwhile, Sienna was glowing. Too much. She twirled between her relatives, hugging each like she'd known them forever. The performance was polished, overly affectionate, and Joyce's gut twisted with something between disbelief and fascination. Daphne, stationed by the cake table, watched the display with her mouth slightly open. When one of the aunts started bragging about her imported marble countertops, shipped straight from Versailles, Daphne muttered under her breath, "Versailles doesn't sell countertops." Joyce caught it and had to suppress a laugh. But laughter wasn't enough to ease her unease. Something about this crowd didn't add up. She'd worked her whole life around people, from the salon chairs to community fundraisers, and she could read body language better than most. These weren't people accustomed to old money manners. They were playing dress-up. Joyce slipped her phone out of her clutch and snapped a few photos. Discreet. Quiet. A hand with 2 perfectly folded cash tips for the valet. A woman wearing a fur with a visible Made in China tag. A man holding his champagne flute like it was a prop, not a drink. The evidence mounted click by click. Mimi caught her in the act. "Joyce Monroe," she whispered, "what on earth are you doing?" "Just documenting," Joyce said softly. "Documenting what?" Joyce's eyes followed Sienna across the room as the bride posed with her parents, their smiles frozen and rehearsed. "Truth," she murmured. Her phone buzzed. Clay Reeves's number already saved from years ago, when she'd hired him to find her ex-business partner's stolen equipment. The man had a knack for uncovering what people tried to bury. Joyce opened a new message and typed, "I need you to look into a family." Her thumb hovered over send for a beat. She glanced again at Blake, laughing, happy, clueless. She hated what she was about to start, but the pit in her stomach told her this wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. Send. The text disappeared into the blue ether of her screen, and with it, any lingering hope that she might be wrong about Sienna Lane. As the photographer called for the Lane family photo, Joyce lifted her glass and pretended to sip, her face serene. But her pulse was sharp, steady, certain. The shutter clicked. Flash burst. Sienna's fake family smiled wide. And Joyce smiled too, because she'd just taken the first step toward tearing the whole performance apart. By the time dessert trays began circulating, the wedding had shifted from glittering ceremony to glossy performance. Joyce sat at the edge of the ballroom, watching servers glide past with tiered plates of crème brûlée, the caramelized tops cracking like glass under spoons. It should have been a moment of satisfaction. She'd helped pay for that catering, $21,000 wired from her retirement account when Sienna's trust fund transfer got delayed by the bank. Joyce had told herself it was for Blake. His happiness was worth the sacrifice. But now, as she watched Sienna toast with her family at the head table, laughter bubbling like champagne, all she could taste was the bitterness of her own naivety. "Everything's perfect," someone near her said. "That bride has such style." Joyce smiled faintly, eyes steady on the shimmering centerpieces. Style, sure. Integrity, not so much. She'd barely taken a sip of her coffee when she caught Sienna's voice drifting across the table, clear, light, cutting. "It's so basic," Sienna said, twirling her fork dismissively. "But his mom insisted on this caterer. She's sentimental about them or something." Bless her heart. Her friends laughed. One of the aunts added, "Well, basic food for basic taste, right?" Joyce's hand tightened around her cup. The ceramic was hot enough to sting, but she didn't move. She kept her smile plastered on, her body perfectly still, only her eyes giving her away, steady, unblinking. She thought of the checks she'd written, the calls she'd made to get last-minute linens when Sienna's wedding coordinator went silent. She'd spent days negotiating discounts, driving across town to pick up items that were now being paraded as part of Sienna's vision. Vision. The word felt poisonous. A soft hand touched her shoulder. "Mom." Blake crouched beside her, tie loosened, face flushed with joy. "Hey. I just wanted to say thanks again, for everything. I know she's been intense, but she's just nervous, you know? Big day, big expectations." Joyce looked at her son, her only child, and for a moment, her resentment melted into something heavier. Pity. He really didn't see it. "Of course, honey," she said, her voice warm, practiced. "She's got a lot on her plate." He smiled, relief flickering in his eyes. "You're the best, Mom? Seriously." Then he was gone, pulled back into the crowd by the orbit of his new wife. Joyce stared at the dance floor, where Sienna spun beneath the chandelier's fractured light, her gown glinting like a weapon. Around her, the actors posing as family clapped in rhythm, perfectly in sync, perfectly false. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She checked the screen. Clay Reeves. Joyce stood and slipped out the side door, stepping into the warm night air. The smell of desert sage and spilled champagne mixed in the breeze. She answered, voice low. Clay? Evening, Joyce, came his gravelly reply. Didn't expect you to call me about a wedding. This isn't about a wedding, she said. He chuckled softly. Didn't think so. We're finding something. Trust me. A pause. The way he said something carried weight. Be careful, he added. This one's got layers. I figured. Enjoy the party while you can. I'll call again soon. The line clicked, dead. Joyce slipped the phone back into her clutch and looked up at the Arizona sky. Violet dusk melting into black, the stars just starting to surface. The music swelled faintly behind her, muffled by the heavy doors. She could go back inside, pretend a little longer, smile for photos. Toast with people who thought appearances were the same as worth. So she did. She walked back in, shoulders square, face glowing for the cameras. When Sienna pulled her close for a photo, smiling wide, eyes cold as glass, Joyce tilted her head, returning the grin. But deep down, she wasn't the mother of the groom anymore. She was a witness, a strategist. And somewhere between the flash and the click, Joyce Monroe quietly decided. If Sienna Lane wanted to play pretend, she was about to meet someone who didn't. The morning after the wedding, Scottsdale felt too quiet. Joyce sat at her kitchen table, nursing black coffee gone cold. Her phone buzzed every few minutes, texts from neighbors, clients, distant cousins who'd seen the wedding photos online. She's stunning. Looks like a fairy tale. You must be so proud. Joyce typed polite thank yous, her jaw tight. If only they'd heard the things Sienna said when the cameras weren't rolling. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Daphne Kroll. Daphne, you're gonna want to see this. Attached were 3 old modeling photos. Same cheekbones, same eyes. But the name in bold at the top wasn't Sienna Lane. It read, Sierra Lane. Joyce's stomach tightened. The poses were exaggerated, overdone. Not the polished, demure image Sienna presented. These were hustler shots, nightclub campaigns, questionable endorsements, one photo with a red convertible and a martini glass. Joyce texted back, Where did you find these? Daphne. Old portfolio site. She scrubbed most of it, but cached pages don't lie. Daphne. And her timelines don't match up. Daphne sent screenshots, posts showing Sienna graduating NYU in 2018, studying abroad in Paris in 2018, and modeling in LA, 2018 baby. 3 different lives, same year. Joyce leaned back, the chair creaking. She's not even consistent in her lies, she muttered. A minute later, her front door opened without a knock. Only one person entered her house like that. Mimi, I'm in here, Joyce called. Mimi strutted in, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose and a tablet in her hand. You're not going to believe what I just dug up. She dropped the tablet on the table and pulled up a Craigslist post from 2019. Event talent needed. Upscale family role players. 200 OHR plus meal stipend. Joyce read aloud. Looking for well-groomed individuals to portray family members for luxury events and social media appearances. She looked up. Mimi, that's exactly what. Yup. Mimi crossed her arms. The uncles, the aunts, the cousins with fake Ivy League stories. It's all right here. Probably a recycled gig. Bet she booked them herself. Joyce exhaled slowly, her mind racing. Send that to me. Already did. Check your email. And Joyce. Mimi hesitated. You sure you're ready to open this can of worms? Once you pull one string? I already pulled it. Joyce's voice was steady. Clay's on it. Mimi nodded, though her eyes softened with concern. By afternoon, Joyce was sitting in her car in the parking lot of Reeves Investigations, an old building tucked behind a car wash and a cactus nursery. Clay's office smelled faintly of coffee and copier toner. He greeted her with a file already in hand. "You don't waste time, do you?" "Never did." She slid a manila envelope across the desk. "These photos, that ad, and her online mess. Start wherever you need to." Clay flipped through the materials, eyebrows arching at the Craigslist ad. "Family role players," he said. "That's a new one. I'll run their faces through my system, see who's local. Some of these folks might not realize what they signed up for." "Meaning?" "Actors. Temp gigs. Most of them don't ask questions when someone flashes cash." Joyce's lips pressed thin. "And Blake still thinks she's genuine." Clay gave a low whistle. "He'll see when we're done." She nodded, standing. "Do what you do best, Clay." "Always do." He smiled slightly. "And Joyce, don't let her rattle you. Women like that build mirrors, not lives." That night, Joyce poured herself a glass of wine and opened Sienna's Instagram out of morbid curiosity. The new post shimmered at the top of the feed. "Self-care day facial at Bella Aesthetics before visiting Auntie in Dubai tomorrow. Family comes first." Joyce zoomed in on the photo. Sienna reclined in a spa chair, cotton headband holding her hair back. Time-stamped Thursday, 3:37 p.m. That was the same day she'd sworn she was on a plane to Dubai to see her sick aunt. Joyce laughed softly, disbelief shading into anger. "You really think no one's watching you?" She took a screenshot and sent it straight to Clay. Joyce, timestamp, same day as the Dubai story. Clay, got it. Meeting Uncle Preston tomorrow. Face to face. Joyce set down her phone, heart pounding. The walls of lies were cracking, thin lines spreading fast. Through her kitchen window, the Arizona night stretched wide and restless. Joyce stared out at the desert, the quiet hum of cicadas filling the air, and whispered to herself, "Let's see what you look like without the filters." Her phone buzzed again. A message from Clay. "Clay, you might want to sit down for this next part." By the time Clay called again, Joyce had already learned to brace herself before answering. His timing was surgical. Early morning, before the noise of the world could dull the sting of truth. "Joyce," he said without preamble. "You were right. All of it." She closed her eyes. "How bad?" Clay exhaled through the phone, the sound rough, weary. "The whole family's a cast, every last one. I traced the payments through an agency out of LA, Cameo House Talent. They specialize in bespoke event appearances. Half those people at the wedding have IMDb pages. Your Uncle Preston played a mall Santa last December." Joyce's heart thudded once, hard. "Actors," she murmured. "Every single one of them. Paid by Sienna directly. I've got contracts, invoices, even fake bios." She built her own pedigree for that wedding. Joyce opened her laptop. "Email me everything." He did. Within minutes, her inbox filled with PDFs, signed contracts, wire transfers, professional headshots. Joyce scrolled slowly, her breath tightening as the truth took shape. Each lie was now tangible, time-stamped, undeniable. One folder caught her attention. The Lane residence, photo shoot package. She opened it. The same white-columned mansion Sienna had proudly called her parents' home appeared on screen, but at the bottom corner the watermark read, "Airbnb Luxe." Joyce stared, a bitter laugh catching in her throat. She clicked the link. Sure enough, there it was. Luxury villa with pool. Paradise Valley, AZ. 200 night. The listing description even matched Sienna's engagement post, "Our family estate, where love and legacy meet." "Legacy," Joyce whispered, shaking her head. "You mean a weekend rental?" Her phone dinged again. Daphne this time. "Daphne. Joyce, I just got word from the bakery." Sienna's check for the cake bounced. Like, big time bounced. Joyce blinked. Of course it did. Joyce. Don't deposit the venue check yet. I'll handle it. She hung up, already dialing the venue manager, her tone calm but decisive. Hi, this is Joyce Monroe. Please hold the final payment for the Monroe Lane wedding. There's a potential issue with the bride's financials. There was silence on the other end. Then, understood, Mrs. Monroe? We'll hold it. As she ended the call, a strange stillness filled the room. For weeks, she'd been questioning her sanity, wondering if she was just a bitter old woman who couldn't accept her son's wife. Now the evidence lay in neat folders across her desktop, proof that her instincts hadn't lied to her. Joyce poured herself another cup of coffee and sat back, eyes fixed on the laptop screen. On social media, Sienna's new post gleamed at the top of her feed. Married into money, so glad to elevate the Monroe name. The caption punched the air out of Joyce's lungs. Elevate? She stared at the photo, Sienna in a white silk robe, holding a champagne glass on the Airbnb balcony she'd called her family's veranda. Her diamond ring caught the light. The comments gushed below. You're glowing, girl. Such class. Monroe looks good on you. Joyce scrolled slowly, her expression unreadable. Class, she muttered. You wouldn't know it if it slapped you. Mimi called just then, her voice sharp. You look like you've been hit by a truck. Clay filled me in. What's the move? Joyce stood, walking toward the window. The desert sun burned bright outside, throwing long streaks across her kitchen tile. I'm done letting her control the story. Meaning? Joyce looked down at her notes, her careful list of lies. She staged a wedding built on fiction. I think it's time someone gave the truth a little spotlight. Joyce, Mimi said cautiously, you're not planning— Oh, I'm planning, Joyce interrupted softly. Just not what she expects. That night, she sat at her vanity, rewriting her speech card for the reception she knew would spill online soon, a family dinner meant to cap off the wedding week. Her hands moved calmly, deliberately. The speech wasn't for a toast anymore. It was a reckoning. She practiced the first line under her breath. Love and truth aren't the same thing, but one can't survive without the other. Her reflection met her gaze in the mirror, eyes clear, mouth steady. The woman staring back looked nothing like the one Sienna had called low class. The soft chime of her phone broke the silence. Another message from Clay. Clay. Interviews done. They all thought it was a film shoot. Clay. You were right. Every single thing. Joyce leaned back in her chair. The truth had a pulse now, and it was beating fast. She closed her laptop and reached for her clutch. Tomorrow, the masks would come off. The ballroom glowed with soft amber light and borrowed pride. Crystal glasses chimed, laughter echoed under vaulted ceilings, and every surface shimmered with an almost desperate polish. It was the family dinner that capped the week-long wedding spectacle. A night meant for gratitude, closure, and curated perfection. Joyce sat quietly at her table, watching Sienna glide from guest to guest in a champagne gown. The younger woman's laugh was too practiced, her compliments too sharp around the edges. Joyce's clutch sat beside her plate, the evidence inside heavy as lead, contracts, screenshots, and the truth printed in black and white. Daphne caught Joyce's eye across the room. The wedding planner's subtle nod said what words didn't need to. It's time. Joyce rose slowly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. She picked up her champagne flute and approached the stage. The chatter thinned as she stepped to the mic. A few guests clapped automatically, assuming another sentimental toast was coming. Sienna looked up from the head table, a glimmer of confusion crossing her face. Oh, Mrs. Monroe. How sweet. Joyce smiled. It was the kind of smile she'd worn for decades. Polite, composed, unshakable. Thank you, Sienna. She tapped the mic lightly. The feedback hush silenced the room. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, she began, her voice calm and measured. But I've been thinking a lot about love and truth. A murmur rippled through the tables. Cameras lifted. Love, she continued, is what builds families. Truth is what keeps them standing. She paused, eyes scanning the room. And sometimes, when one goes missing, the other starts to rot. A low hum of unease rolled through the guests. Joyce turned toward the head table. Now, I'd like to take a moment to thank our new family. Her tone was gracious, almost light. Let's see. There's Sienna's uncle, Preston, right? The man in question straightened, smiling nervously. Yes, ma'am, he said, voice trembling. Preston, Joyce said kindly. I just adore your stories about the vineyard in Napa. Tell us again. What's Sienna's middle name? The room stilled. Preston blinked. His mouth opened, closed. Her middle name? He repeated. Yes, Joyce said. You must know it. You raised her, didn't you? A few chuckles flickered through the audience. Uncertain? Uncomfortable? Sienna shifted in her seat. Joyce, she said tightly. This isn't necessary. Joyce raised one hand, the gesture small but absolute. The same hand that had held Blake through fevers guided him across busy streets, combed his hair before picture day. It was not a hand that trembled now. I'm sorry, dear, Joyce said smoothly, eyes still on the man. Go ahead, Mr. Lane. Preston swallowed. It's Marie? Joyce smiled. No, it's not. A murmur rolled across the room like distant thunder. Joyce turned back to the crowd. And her father, she continued, her voice sharpening just enough. Tell me again which company you own, the one with the private jets? A beat. The man beside Sienna, the so-called father, looked cornered, sweat glistening at his temple. Well, we're an international... Because I called that company this morning, Joyce interrupted gently. They've never heard of a Lane family. Imagine that. The air in the room changed. Gone was the polite applause and champagne fizz. What remained was electric, curiosity sharpening into shock. Sienna stood abruptly. Enough. You're ruining this. Joyce's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. No, sweetheart, I'm saving it. The silence was surgical now. Guests leaned forward, eyes darting between the bride and the mother of the groom. Even Blake, standing near the bar, looked frozen. Joyce's hand found the edge of her clutch. She set it on the podium, flipping it open. The papers inside gleamed under the light. Contract-stamped Cameo House talent, photos of the family on other sets, even a printout of the Airbnb listing. These people aren't her family, Joyce said, her voice steady and cutting through the stunned air like glass. They're paid actors. Gasps burst like popcorn. Someone dropped a glass. The photographer lowered his camera, wide-eyed. Sienna's face drained of color. That's a lie. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, Joyce said softly. And so does he. She gestured toward the entrance, and there, almost on cue, Clay Reeves stepped into the doorway, a manila folder in his hand. Every eye turned toward him. Sienna's jaw dropped. Joyce didn't smile this time. Now, if you'd like to continue pretending, I suggest you tell your cast their cues, because I think the show just ended. The room erupted. Voices, whispers, confusion, cameras flashing again, but this time for all the wrong reasons. Joyce stepped down from the podium, her heels clicking in rhythm with the chaos behind her. She didn't look back. Not yet. Not until the moment was ready to break wide open. The room detonated into chaos. A chorus of whispers and gasps rippled through the tables like wildfire, the kind that no one could stamp out once it caught. Champagne spilled, chairs scraped, and camera flashes flickered with the frantic energy of vultures circling a carcass. Sienna stood frozen at the head table, one manicured hand clutching her chest. Her voice cut through the rising noise, shrill, trembling, and venomous. "You're ruining my wedding." Joyce stayed near the podium, her hand resting lightly on the microphone stand, steady as stone. "If a lie can be ruined by the truth," she said quietly, "it wasn't much of a wedding to begin with." The silence that followed lasted just long enough for everyone to hear the soft clatter of silverware hitting plates. Then, movement. One of the uncles, the same man who'd stumbled over Sienna's last name days earlier, stood abruptly. His expression shifted from shame to defiance. "This isn't worth it," he muttered, tossing his napkin onto the table. His voice carried, low but distinct. "She didn't say it would go this far." The air left the room in a collective gasp. Sienna's face twisted. "Sit down, you're being ridiculous." But he didn't. He walked straight for the door, his suit rumpled, his dignity already halfway out of the building. Another relative followed, then another, like dominoes falling one after another. The illusion was crumbling in real time. Blake pushed through the crowd. Confusion etched deep into his face. His tie hung loose, his eyes darting between his mother and his new bride. "What's going on?" His voice cracked on the question. Sienna turned toward him, tears glimmering under the chandeliers. "Blake, please. She's making this up. She's jealous. She hates me." Joyce didn't move, didn't speak. She simply met her son's eyes. Blake looked between them again, searching for footing. "Mom, tell me this isn't true." Joyce's silence was answer enough. Clay, still standing near the doorway, gave a single nod. "We've got proof, son. It's all real." Sienna's mask slipped entirely. Her sobs came sharp and uneven. "You said you wanted someone refined," she shouted at Blake. "Someone who could make you proud. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to give you that?" The room drew in a collective breath. Even her own voice seemed to betray her. Too honest, too loud, too desperate. Blake's face went pale. "You lied to me," he whispered. "I did it for us," Sienna pleaded, reaching for him. "You said your mom never liked me, that she thought I wasn't good enough. So I built a family that looked good enough." Joyce stayed perfectly still. Inside, her heart cracked in quiet sympathy, not for Sienna, but for the boy she'd raised, now watching his world tilt on its axis. Blake stepped back. His voice came out flat. "You don't build love out of lies." Sienna's hand dropped to her side. The mascara streaking down her cheeks glistened under the golden light. Around them, guests stood like mannequins, unsure whether to leave, to help, or to record. Sienna's chest heaved, her gaze flicked toward Joyce. Burning, wild. "You think you've won, don't you?" Joyce didn't respond. Her eyes stayed locked on her son's face, not hers. "You destroyed me," Sienna hissed. "No," Joyce said softly. "You did that yourself." The words landed like a verdict. Sienna's breath hitched. Then, without warning, she tore off toward the side corridor, the satin of her gown dragging behind her like a ghost. The door to the dressing suite slammed hard enough to rattle the sconces. The band faltered, their song dying mid-verse. The DJ, uncertain and pale, reached down and clicked the music off entirely. The sudden silence was thick, oppressive, and final. For a long, suspended moment, nobody spoke. The chandeliers hummed faintly overhead, their light trembling in the quiet aftermath. Then Blake turned to his mother. His voice was low, hoarse. "She lied about everything, didn't she?" Joyce hesitated, her throat tightening. "Everything that mattered," she said. He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself, then walked toward the door Sienna had fled through. Blake, Joyce said quietly. He paused but didn't turn around. I have to hear it from her, he said, and pushed the door open. The room collectively exhaled as he disappeared inside. Joyce stood alone at the edge of the wreckage she hadn't wanted but had no choice but to cause. Around her, the guests whispered. The servers exchanged wide-eyed glances, and the soft hum of unease replaced the music that once filled the space. Then, from the dressing suite, a sound cut through the silence. Not words, but a single, sharp crash. Glass breaking. Joyce's pulse jumped. The sharp crash from the dressing suite had frozen every guest in place, but a beat later, the door creaked open. Blake emerged alone, pale under the golden light, his tux jacket gone, his bow tie undone. His eyes found his mother's across the ballroom, raw and searching. It's over, he said quietly. She's gone. Joyce didn't ask where. She didn't need to. The hollow quiet that followed told her everything. Guests began filtering out in uneasy clusters, heels clicking, whispers trailing like static. The perfect wedding Sienna had built had turned to smoke in a single evening. The floral arch still gleamed by the stage, but petals were scattered across the floor like the aftermath of a storm. Blake walked toward her, every step heavy. The silence between them was a living thing, uncomfortable, dense with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. When he finally stopped in front of her, he spoke with a kind of exhausted disbelief. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Joyce took a slow breath. Her hands were clasped tightly, nails pressing into her palms. Because you wouldn't have heard me, she said simply. His brow furrowed. That's not fair. No, she said softly. It's true. You were in love. You saw what you wanted to see, and I wasn't about to compete with that. Blake looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. I thought you just didn't like her. I didn't like what she wanted from you, Joyce replied. That's different. He sank into the nearest chair, elbows on his knees, staring down at the floor. Joyce sat beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. The ballroom buzzed faintly with the sound of servers clearing plates and guests shuffling out. Somewhere, glass clinked softly, almost respectful. Outside the wide windows, the desert evening stretched violet and vast. Joyce could see the line of cars pulling away from the venue, their headlights glowing like departing ghosts. Blake let out a quiet, unsteady laugh. You really blew it up, didn't you? Joyce tilted her head. I didn't have to. She built the bomb herself. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. You've been saving me my whole life, he said. I guess I didn't want you to save me from this. Joyce felt something ache deep in her chest, but her eyes stayed dry. You didn't need saving. You needed clarity. He nodded, gaze distant. The hum of cicadas seeped through the half-open doors, mixing with the muffled sound of a night wind brushing through palm leaves. After a while, Blake stood and walked to the edge of the patio doors. I need some air, he murmured. Joyce followed him outside. The desert air was cooler now, fragrant with dust and wilting flowers. They sat together on the low stone steps beneath the veranda, their shoulders barely touching. Do you think she'll come back? Blake asked after a while. Joyce's gaze moved toward the back of the property, toward the service exit where the catering staff had been loading up. Through the dim light, she caught a flash of white. Sienna's wedding gown, the train dragging behind her as she disappeared through the gate, barefoot, mascara streaking her face. Joyce's voice was calm. She just did. Blake followed her gaze. He didn't say anything. The faint slam of a car door echoed, then the fading roar of an engine. The sound hung in the air like punctuation, final, absolute. Half the remaining guests began to drift out soon after. Some offered polite nods, others avoided eye contact entirely. Joyce recognized the looks, sympathy wrapped in gossip. She'd seen them too many times before in her years behind a salon chair. Mimi appeared through the chaos like a small, fierce storm, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. "Well," she said, handing one to Joyce, "if I ever doubted you had flair for drama, I take it back." Joyce managed a thin smile. "That wasn't drama, Mimi. That was damage control." Mimi took a long sip, eyes softening. "You all right?" "I will be," Joyce said. "He needs space right now." Blake was still standing by the edge of the patio, staring into the dark. His silhouette looked older somehow, stripped of the blind optimism he'd worn like armor. Joyce wanted to reach for him, but she didn't. This was his first heartbreak as a man, not a boy. He had to stand in it. Her phone buzzed against the table beside her. She picked it up without looking. A new text from Clay. "Clay, want the final receipts?" Joyce's eyes lingered on the message. She stared at the glowing screen, her reflection faint in the glass. For a long second she didn't respond. Then, slowly, she typed back. "Joyce. Not yet. Let him breathe first." She set the phone down beside her drink and looked out at the horizon, where the city lights blinked faintly against the desert's dark edge. "Don't you dare cry," Mimi murmured beside her. Joyce exhaled, a small, wry smile tugging at her lips. "Oh, I won't," she said. "She doesn't deserve my tears." But her voice trembled just enough to betray that, maybe, this time, she almost did. It was nearly noon when Clay called again, his gravelly voice cutting through the stillness of Joyce's kitchen. She'd been sitting by the window with a cup of coffee gone cold, watching a dust devil spin across the road. The desert light was harsh, unflattering, perfect for the truth. "Joyce," Clay said, "you're going to want to sit down for this one." She braced herself. "What now?" "I pulled the marriage certificate," he said. "Or tried to. There isn't one." Joyce frowned. "What do you mean, isn't one?" "I mean she never filed it. No official record, no county seal, no signature from the officiant. The whole thing, legally, doesn't exist. Your son's not married." For a moment, Joyce couldn't speak. The words felt suspended in the air between them. Then she let out a sound, half laugh, half disbelief. "So, after all that, she didn't even make it official?" Clay's tone softened. "She made it look official. Different thing entirely." Joyce's gaze drifted to the framed photo on her counter. Blake at 6 years old, grinning with a missing tooth, flour on his face from baking cookies. "She built everything on appearances," Joyce murmured. "Of course she'd fake the paperwork, too." "Got a friend down at the recorder's office," Clay continued. "He double-checked the state system. Nothing. Not even an attempt to file." Joyce set her mug down. "Send me the report." "Already did." She ended the call, exhaled slowly, then picked up her phone and dialed Mimi. By afternoon, the 2 women were sitting in a quiet corner of Attorney Reed Carson's office. The blinds were half drawn, letting in slanted bars of Scottsdale sun. Reed flipped through the documents, his silver reading glasses sliding down his nose. "Well," he said finally, tapping the file. "Clay's right. There's no record, no signature, no stamp. It's as if the marriage never happened." Mimi leaned back, eyebrows shooting up. "You're telling me all that mess wasn't even legal?" Reed smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Joyce clasped her hands on her lap. "So Blake's not bound to her by anything?" "Not a thing. Legally, he's as single as the day before he met her." For the first time in weeks, Joyce's shoulders eased. She felt something between relief and vindication wash over her, a quiet, measured satisfaction. "Good," she said simply. Mimi grinned. "That's poetic justice if I've ever seen it." Reed closed the folder and leaned back. "You should still encourage him to file a separation statement just in case she tries anything. People like her don't go quietly." They never do, Joyce replied. 2 days later, Blake called. His voice sounded hollow, tired. I'm moving out of her apartment, he said. Joyce gripped the phone tighter. Do you need help? No, he said. I just need to be done. She didn't press him. She'd learned long ago that some wounds healed faster in silence. That night, she pulled out her will from the fireproof box under her bed. It still listed Sienna Lane as a conditional beneficiary, a detail Joyce had added months ago when she thought the girl might become family. Now, under the quiet hum of her bedside lamp, Joyce drew a clean line through Sienna's name. She replaced it with one word: charity. The pen didn't shake once. The next morning, her phone began to buzz before she'd even had her coffee. Blake. She's been calling nonstop. Joyce. How many times? Blake. 27 missed calls, 4 voicemails, all different tones. One crying, one angry, one begging, one pretending nothing happened. Joyce stared at the messages for a long time before replying. Joyce. Block her. Blake. I already did. When he came by that evening, there was a quiet peace to him that hadn't been there before. He looked tired, yes, but lighter too. Joyce fixed him dinner, and for once, neither of them spoke about Sienna. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was clean. After he left, Joyce sat on the porch with a glass of red wine. The Arizona sunset bled orange over the rooftops, fierce and unrelenting. Her phone buzzed once more. Clay again. Clay. You were right from the start, every piece of it. She smiled faintly, typing back. Joyce. I wasn't looking to be right. I was looking for peace. Clay replied with a single word. Clay. Then you've earned it. Joyce looked out toward the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Sienna was still spinning her stories, trying to rewrite reality to her liking. But for the first time, it didn't matter. Joyce had her truth, her son, and her quiet. And that, she realized, was all she'd ever needed. Then, as she stood to go inside, a sharp ping echoed from her phone. One last message from an unknown number. Unknown. You think this is over? You don't know me yet? The text disappeared a second later. Joyce stared at the screen, the desert wind brushing against her face. She didn't reply. She just whispered, Oh, honey. I do now. By the time it hit social media, the dust had almost settled. Or so Joyce thought. It started with a notification on her phone one morning. Sienna Lane official has posted a new update. The name made her stomach tighten, but she opened it anyway. There it was. A long, furious caption beneath a filtered selfie of Sienna in oversized sunglasses, sitting in what looked like a hotel lobby. It's sad when people can't handle seeing someone else happy. I was sabotaged at my own wedding by a bitter old woman who never accepted me. She destroyed my reputation out of jealousy, because she couldn't stand seeing her son marry someone younger, prettier, and successful. I guess some people just hate to see others win. Pachchua truth hurts. Cars stay classy. Pach family drama. The post had been up for 20 minutes and already had over 2,000 likes. Comments rolled in like smoke. You deserve better. So toxic. Cut that woman out of your life. Joyce read it twice, calm and deliberate. Then she set her coffee down and opened her photos. She didn't rush. She didn't rage. She simply scrolled through her saved files until she found the image Clay had sent weeks ago. A digital invoice stamped Cameo House Talent. With the description Family Role Play Package, full weekend rate. It had Sienna's name on it, her credit card number partially visible, her digital signature glowing in neat cursive. Joyce tapped Share, uploaded the image directly under Sienna's post and typed, I usually let lies speak for themselves. But if anyone's curious, here's the receipt. No hashtags, no explanation, just the truth. For a few minutes, the comments section went quiet. Then it erupted. Wait, what? This is real? She hired actors? Someone grab popcorn. Sienna's next reply came fast, defensive, erratic. That's fake. She photoshopped it. She's been stalking me since the engagement. But the damage was already done. Daphne was next to enter the fray. The wedding planner posted a photo of the bakery invoice, a neat red, returned, insufficient funds stamp clear as day. Daphne Kroll, events. Not sure about jealousy, but my accountant sure didn't appreciate a bounced check. The comment section exploded again. Screenshots flew across Twitter, group chats, wedding forums. Then Mimi joined in. Blunt as ever, posting from her own account. Rich girls don't Venmo for their own cake. It got 20,000 likes in 3 hours. Joyce's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters DM'd her. Online tabloids tagged her name. Strangers debated in threads about fake wealth and wedding scams. But she didn't respond again. Her one post was enough. The truth didn't need her commentary. By afternoon, Sienna had deleted her rant, then her entire account. The carefully curated feed of luxury handbags, family brunches, and motivational quotes vanished overnight, like it had never existed. Joyce sat on her porch that evening, phone face down beside her glass of wine. The desert was quiet again, the kind of stillness that feels earned. Mimi called, cackling into the receiver. You blew up Instagram without saying 5 words. I'm proud of you. Joyce Monroe. Joyce smiled faintly. I didn't blow it up. She lit her own fuse. I just held a match to it. You could have had a reality show, Mimi teased. No thanks, Joyce said. I've had enough fiction for one lifetime. When they hung up, Joyce turned her phone over again. No new notifications, no new messages, just silence. Later that night, Blake stopped by. He didn't say much, just stood in the doorway for a moment before crossing the room and hugging her tight. It was the kind of hug that carried both apology and gratitude. When he pulled back, he said quietly, I deleted every photo of the wedding. Joyce searched his face. You sure? He nodded. Yeah, I want to remember what's real, not what was staged. She cupped his cheek, smiled softly. Good boy. He laughed under his breath, then left for the night. Lighter than she'd seen him in months. Joyce locked up, poured herself another glass, and sat by the window, the quiet hum of cicadas filling the air. For the first time in a long time, her mind wasn't replaying what she'd lost, only what she'd reclaimed. But just as she started to drift off to sleep, her phone buzzed once more. A notification. Not from Sienna this time, but from a local gossip forum. The headline glowed under the screen's cold light. Monroe wedding scandal. Bride missing after public humiliation. Joyce's breath caught. She stared at the post. The last photo of Sienna. Grainy security footage from a gas station on the outskirts of town. She was barefoot, still wearing the same torn wedding dress, and looking straight into the camera. The morning after the missing bride headline broke, Joyce expected another round of chaos, but Scottsdale woke up quiet, eerily quiet. The desert sun climbed like nothing had happened, indifferent to the gossip swirling beneath it. Joyce sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling through the newest flurry of messages from Clay. He'd been working late, chasing paper trails, piecing together what was left of Sienna's fabricated empire. The first message read, Clay. Pulled her business filings. None of her LLCs exist. Then another. Clay. 3 brand partnerships? All affiliate scams, fake promo codes, stolen stock photos. She's been building a mirage. Joyce exhaled, shaking her head. She shouldn't have been surprised. Still, the completeness of Sienna's illusion, how deep the deception went, made her skin crawl. Clay's next message came with attachments. Screenshots, corporate records, cross-referenced data. Clay. Her luxury branding firm is a shell site, registered to a P.O. box. I ran the EIN numbers, random digits, not even real tax IDs. Joyce took a long sip of coffee, the bitter edge grounding her. She typed back, Joyce. She built a business the same way she built a family, out of thin air. A minute later, Clay replied, Clay, you want me to forward this to the venues? Keep her from doing this again? Joyce stared at the glowing screen. Through her window, she could see the sun lighting up the old Palo Verde tree out front, the same one Blake used to climb as a kid. Joyce, send it to me. I'll handle it. By afternoon, she'd sent a tidy, professional email to every contact in the event network: venues, planners, caterers, stylists. She attached the evidence neatly, her tone polite but firm. For your awareness, Sienna Lane, aka Sierra Lane, has been operating under false credentials and fabricated business entities. Please flag accordingly to avoid future financial loss. She didn't expect replies, but they came anyway. Grateful, outraged, affirming. By evening, one of the biggest local venues posted a quiet note on its own page. Effective immediately, we are updating our vendor and client vetting process. Thank you to those who help keep our community honest. Joyce smiled faintly. That was as close to a public victory as she'd ever need. When she called Mimi to tell her, her friend was already halfway to laughter. Honey, she's blacklisted from every event space in Maricopa County. You're a legend. You realize that, right? Joyce rolled her eyes, though she was smiling. A legend for telling the truth. That's new. Truth sells, Mimi said. Now that the world stopped spinning, I'm celebrating with a spa day. You, me, cucumber water, no phones? Joyce chuckled. You go ahead. I'll join you when I'm ready. Mimi's tone softened. You sure you're okay, Jay? I'm better than okay, Joyce said quietly. I'm free. That night, the doorbell rang just as the sun sank behind the mountains. Joyce opened the door to find a delivery man holding a bouquet so big it looked like it belonged at a movie premiere. Delivery for Ms. Monroe, he said, handing it over. The arrangement was a mix of lilies and white roses, simple, elegant, her favorite. She didn't need to check the card to know who it was from. Still, she unfolded the small envelope tucked inside. Mom, I see clearly now. B. The handwriting was clean, but slightly uneven, like it had been written slowly, with care. Joyce read it twice before setting the card down beside her sink. For the first time in months, she felt her throat tighten, not from anger or exhaustion, but from something gentler, relief. She stood there a while, surrounded by the faint scent of roses and desert dust drifting through the open window. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mimi's laughter wasn't echoing from the phone. Blake wasn't knocking things over in the kitchen. Clay wasn't calling with bad news. It was just Joyce, alone with the aftermath of truth. Her eyes burned before she realized she was crying. One tear, then another, until she had to laugh at herself. I said I wasn't going to, she whispered. But damn it, this one's earned. She wiped her face, poured a small glass of wine and raised it toward the flowers. To seeing clearly, she said softly. Her phone buzzed again, and for an instant her chest tightened, but it was just a notification from Clay. Clay, thought you'd want to know. The agency's pulled her accounts. Everything's offline. She's officially gone dark. Joyce stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. Joyce, thank you. Let her stay there. She set the phone down, her smile faint but steady. Out in the distance, a storm was forming over the horizon, lightning flashing in the far desert, silent but bright. Joyce watched it roll, the wind picking up just enough to rattle the old wind chime by her door. Some endings, she thought, didn't need noise, just closure. And yet, as thunder murmured faintly across the desert, her phone buzzed one last time, an unknown number again. Unknown. You think you buried me, but roots grow back. The storm flickered once more, lighting up the pale reflection of Joyce's face in the window. She didn't move, didn't delete it. She just whispered, "Then I'll be ready." The morning after the storm, Scottsdale glistened like glass. The rain had washed everything clean, but the desert air still carried static. Restless and sharp, like the aftermath of something unfinished. Joyce woke early, coffee in hand, staring at the unknown message from the night before. You think you buried me, but roots grow back. It had no profile photo, no traceable number, no location tag. Just that one chilling line. She didn't panic. She didn't even flinch. She'd spent 61 years weathering worse storms than digital ghosts. Instead, she took a screenshot, attached it to an email, and sent it to her attorney, Reed Carson. Subject: threat message. Morning, Reed. Forwarding this for documentation. Do what you think's necessary. By noon, Reed had called back, his tone clipped but calm. It's likely nothing, he said, but we'll treat it as something. What can we do? Joyce asked, her voice steady. I'll draft a cease and desist, Reed said. We'll send it to every known contact of hers, actors, agencies, relatives she's faked. If she's behind it, she'll know we're watching. If it's one of her so-called family, they'll scatter. Good, Joyce said. Make it loud. That afternoon, she watched the process unfold like clockwork. Emails dispatched, legal language cutting sharp and clear. Defamation, harassment, intent to intimidate. Words Sienna would understand, because they carried the one thing she'd never truly had: authority. By the next morning, Clay texted with an update. Clay, that dad actor deleted all his posts. Full wipe. Every photo from the wedding. Gone. Joyce. How fast? Clay. Less than 24 hours. Someone scared him. My bet? Reed's letter worked. Joyce smiled faintly. Let them clean up their own mess, she murmured. By the end of the week, Sienna's name had disappeared from every platform, every directory, every tag. The accounts were shuttered. The aliases she'd built for her fake businesses, Sierra Lane Consulting, Lux Image LLC, Elite Life Co., had been delisted. It was like she'd never existed at all. Even the gossip sites stopped biting. The world had moved on. And yet, Joyce didn't feel vengeful. Only done. She spent that quiet Sunday doing something that had been on her mind for weeks. She drove downtown to First Valley Bank, walked to the teller, and opened a new savings account. Account name: the Low-Class Women's Fund. Purpose: microloans for single working mothers starting small businesses. It wasn't charity. It was a statement. A reclamation of the insult that had started it all. When the teller asked if she'd like to designate a nickname for the account, Joyce smiled. Yes, she said. Call it Roots. Later, she met Mimi at their favorite cafe, a little bakery that smelled of sugar and espresso. Mimi was already there, waving a manila folder like a victory flag. You're gonna love this, she said, sliding it across the table. Inside was a framed screenshot, Joyce's now legendary Instagram comment beneath Sienna's post. The simple caption, "Here's the receipt." Across the bottom, Mimi had added a glossy gold label, "Low-Class Ugly Woman Strikes Back." Joyce laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. You're ridiculous, she said, wiping her eyes. Maybe, Mimi said, but this deserves a place of honor. They hung it right there on the bakery wall, beside the old photos of Scottsdale from the 1980s. Customers walking in would glance at it, curious, and ask about the story. Mimi would just smile and say, It's about a woman who refused to stay quiet. That night, Joyce drove home under a deep, endless desert sky. The wind carried traces of rain, of warmth, of something almost peaceful. Her house was dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen light and the bouquet of lilies still standing tall on the counter. She poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the window, watching the stillness settle. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. For a heartbeat, her chest tightened. Old reflex. But when she looked, it was from Blake. Blake. Dinner tomorrow? Just you and me. I'll cook. Joyce smiled, her thumb hovering over the screen. Joyce. You sure? I might critique your seasoning. Blake. That's fair. You've earned the right. She locked her phone and exhaled, her reflection steady in the window's glass. The woman staring back at her looked calm, whole. But as she turned off the light and walked toward her room, the faint glow of her phone lit up one last time. From an email address she didn't recognize. Subject. You didn't bury me, Joyce. You just taught me how to hide better. The screen dimmed before she could open it. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, long and low. Joyce stood in the dark, her jaw tight, her pulse steady. Hide all you want, she whispered. The truth always finds its way home. The next evening, the sun melted down over Scottsdale in slow ribbons of orange and rust, turning the stucco walls of Joyce's house into a warm, quiet glow. The air outside smelled faintly of rain from the storm days before. Fresh, clean, but still heavy with the kind of stillness that made memories louder. Joyce was just setting 2 coffee mugs on the table when she heard the knock. 3 soft taps. Familiar. She opened the door to find Blake standing there, hair a little longer than usual, dark circles beneath his eyes, a paper bag in his hand. Dinner, he said. Don't ask what it is. I'm not sure it survived the drive. Joyce smiled and stepped aside. You made it through her cooking for months. I'll survive yours. He set the bag down on the counter, hands shoved deep into his pockets. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, Mom, can we sit? They moved to the kitchen table. Joyce could see how hard he was holding himself together. The tight jaw, the fidgeting hands, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. She waited. She'd learned that silence was a stronger invitation than questions ever were. Finally, Blake exhaled. I owe you an apology. Joyce's brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. He rubbed a hand over his face. You were right about her. You were right about everything. But it's more than that. I was wrong about you. His voice cracked a little. I thought you were being judgmental, controlling. I didn't realize she was... He stopped himself, shaking his head. She made me think you hated her from day one. Joyce's chest tightened, but she stayed quiet. Blake looked up at her, eyes red-rimmed. She isolated me, Mom. Slowly. She started with little things. Your mom's overstepping. Your mom doesn't respect boundaries. Your mom's embarrassed by me. I believed her because it was easier than believing she was lying. He laughed, short and bitter. I even stopped calling you some weeks. She said it was healthier. Joyce reached across the table and rested her hand on his wrist. It was the first time she'd touched him since the night of the wedding. His skin felt colder than she remembered. Blake looked down at their hands, then back up. I saw the red flags, he admitted. I just ignored them. I wanted her to be who she said she was so badly that I convinced myself she was. Joyce felt her throat tighten. You loved her, she said simply. He nodded. Yeah, and she used that like a weapon. His voice dropped to a whisper. I think she picked me because I was easy to rewrite. Joyce squeezed his hand gently, her voice soft but firm. You're not weak, Blake. You're human. You wanted love. You just met someone who mistook love for leverage. He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. I kept thinking about that night. How calm you were. How you just stood there while everything fell apart. You didn't yell, didn't gloat. You just told the truth. Joyce managed a small smile. Truth doesn't need volume, honey. Just timing. He gave a wet laugh, wiping at his eyes. You raised me right, he said, voice trembling. She just made me forget it. That broke her. Joyce didn't think. She just reached across the table and pulled him into her arms. He resisted for half a second before collapsing against her, his head dropping onto her shoulder. She wrapped both arms around him, feeling his chest heave with quiet sobs. It was the same way she'd held him after scraped knees and schoolyard heartbreaks. Only now the stakes were years heavier. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The house hummed with the soft tick of the wall clock, the faint creak of the wind outside, the rhythm of forgiveness finding its way home. When Blake finally pulled back, his eyes were clearer. He let out a long breath. Can I ask something? Of course. Do you think she's gone for good? Joyce hesitated, glancing at the half-lit window. People like her don't disappear. They just find new mirrors. He nodded slowly. Then I hope she looks into one long enough to see what she did. Joyce reached for the coffee pot, pouring them each a fresh cup. Hope, she said gently, is fine, but peace tastes better. They sat together in the quiet, sipping in unison, saying nothing more. Outside, the sky deepened into twilight. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then silence again. Joyce looked across the table at her son, his face softened by lamplight, and felt a calm she hadn't known in months. Later, when he left, he kissed her forehead like he used to before heading off to college. Love you, Mom, he murmured. She watched him drive off, taillights fading into the desert dark. For the first time in weeks, her heart didn't ache. It exhaled. That night, she slept without the hum of her phone nearby, without dreams of Sienna's ghost or Clay's warnings. Just sleep, clean and unbroken. Until at dawn, the phone on her nightstand buzzed once. A new message. No name, no number. Just an image. It was the screenshot of her fund's bank account, the low-class women's fund. Someone had accessed it. A note beneath the balance read, "Nice account name. I'll take what's mine next." 2 weeks later, the Arizona sun rose soft and gold, painting the streets of Scottsdale in warm, forgiving light. The gossip had finally cooled, the posts buried under new scandals, and the city had gone back to pretending it hadn't devoured every detail of Joyce Monroe's family drama. But for Joyce, the quiet wasn't an ending. It was an intermission. That morning, she stood before her bedroom mirror, fastening the button of her red suit jacket. It was the same one she'd worn years ago when she sold her salon. Her power color, Mimi had called it. The kind that says you survived the storm and learned to dance in the wind. Joyce smoothed her sleeves, ran a hand through her silver-streaked hair, and smiled at her reflection. There was no shame left in her posture, no hesitation in the way she looked herself in the eye. In the kitchen, a card waited on the counter in Blake's handwriting. Small get-together, noon, backyard, dress for victory, not survival. So she did. When Joyce arrived at Blake's house, the backyard had been transformed. String lights zigzagged over a long table set for 10. Daphne's handiwork, clearly, the tableware matched, the flowers understated but elegant. Blake stood by the grill wearing an apron that said, "Trust the cook." Mimi was already there, fussing over a cake that looked like it had been plucked from a magazine cover. "Finally!" Mimi exclaimed when she saw Joyce. "Look at you, hot mama in red. You're about to outshine your own son." Joyce laughed. "You baked?" Mimi lifted the lid with pride. The cake was simple. White frosting, red trim, and in careful piping across the top. To truth and second chances. Joyce's chest tightened at the sight. You didn't have to do that. Oh, I did, Mimi said, waving a spatula. After everything, this family deserves a happy ending with frosting. Daphne appeared behind her, carrying a large framed printout wrapped in tissue paper. And I brought this. She peeled it open and turned it around. Inside the frame was a screenshot of Joyce's viral Instagram comment, the one that had started the avalanche. But at the top of the printout, in bold black font, Daphne had added, "Verified. Not your real family." The backyard burst into laughter. Even Blake cracked a grin. "That's staying right here in the living room," he said. Joyce rolled her eyes, but the warmth in her voice betrayed her. "You're all ridiculous." "Maybe," Daphne said, winking, "but we're your kind of ridiculous." As the laughter died down, Blake clinked a fork against a glass. "Can I get everyone's attention?" The crowd quieted. Clay, Reed, a few close friends from the salon days, all gathered under the glowing string lights. "I wanted to do this," Blake began, "because the last time I threw a party, I didn't exactly invite the right crowd." His voice was steady, confident in a way Joyce hadn't heard in a long time. "So tonight's not about a wedding. It's about the people who stood by when the lights went out. The real ones." Mimi raised her glass. "We'll drink to that." "Not yet," Blake said, smiling toward his mother. "Mom, you go first." Joyce blinked, caught off guard. "Me?" "Yeah," he said. "You've earned the mic back." The group chuckled. Someone handed her a champagne flute and she stood. "I'll keep it short," Joyce said, her tone half playful, half honest. "I've learned a few things this past year. That silence is sometimes the loudest truth. That class isn't about money. It's about how you treat people when you could get away with treating them worse. And that family—" She looked around the table, eyes pausing on Blake. "Family isn't always who shows up in your photos. It's who shows up when your world catches fire." A hush fell, warm and complete. Joyce raised her glass. To second chances, and to never mistaking polish for integrity again. Glasses clinked, laughter resumed, and music drifted softly through the air. Later, when the plates were empty and the stars began to wink overhead, Blake stood beside her with his own glass, his smile small but certain. "To my real family," he said quietly, lifting it toward her. Joyce met his eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "To the son I never lost." They drank in silence, the moment stretching golden and fragile. The night was perfect, so perfect it felt borrowed. The wind carried laughter and the faint hum of an old country song from someone's phone. As the guests began to leave, Mimi lingered, helping gather plates. "See?" she said, nudging Joyce. "Not all weddings end in fire. Some end in peace." Joyce smiled. "Peace looks good on him." "On you too, Jay." When everyone was gone, Joyce stood alone beneath the string lights. She ran her fingers along the rim of an empty glass, listening to the quiet hum of crickets and the faint buzz of the power lines overhead. Then her phone vibrated in her pocket. One new email. She hesitated before checking it, but the subject line froze her blood. Account access notification. The Low-Class Women's Fund. A withdrawal of $25,000 has been initiated. Joyce's heart dropped. The sender field read, S. Lane. And below that, one short line. "You built something worth stealing. Finally." The night wind flicked at her red suit as the string lights swayed overhead. Joyce didn't panic. She set her jaw, slipped her phone into her pocket, and looked up at the sky. "Not this time," she whispered. "You wanted a war. You've got one." The next morning, Scottsdale glimmered like it was brand new. The storm had washed the dust from the shop signs, the sidewalks sparkled faintly in the sun, and even the air felt different, lighter somehow, like the town itself had exhaled. Joyce parked her old sedan along Main Street and stepped out, smoothing the collar of her denim jacket. She hadn't been down this stretch in months, the block where she'd built her first salon, Monroe and Davis, with Mimi 3 decades ago. It was a habit she'd fallen out of. The same way she'd fallen out of remembering that her life had been full long before Sienna Lane ever tried to rewrite it. Now, walking past the row of storefronts, she saw reflections of who she used to be in each window. The young hairdressers laughing inside the new blowout bar that had replaced their old salon, the seamstress across the street still using the same shop Joyce had recommended years ago, the tiny florist who'd once been their Saturday client. The world had moved forward, but it had grown from the roots she helped plant. She smiled. Not the kind of smile you wear for photos, but the kind that reaches down deep. "Morning, Ms. Kiss Monroe," called a voice from across the street. It was Lila, one of her old assistants, now running her own salon. "Morning, sweetheart," Joyce called back, waving. "Your windows look great." Lila grinned. "Trying to live up to the legend." Joyce laughed, shaking her head as she continued her walk. The desert breeze tugged at her hair, and for once, she let it. She paused in front of the empty corner where Monroe and Davis had once stood. The window now displayed a yoga studio, but if she squinted, she could still see the ghost of her old sign, the one Mimi had painted by hand. Joyce reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check, not large, but enough. It was made out to the Scottsdale School for the Performing Arts, with a note attached: Scholarship Fund for Drama Students. Anonymous donor. When she'd called the director earlier, she'd only said one thing: make sure it goes to the kid who works hardest, not the one who shines easiest. She slid the envelope through the mail slot and stood for a moment, her hand resting on the doorframe. "Drama school, huh?" came a familiar voice behind her. Joyce turned to find Mimi leaning against her car, sunglasses perched atop her head and a grin spreading across her face. "Donating to the arts now? I thought you swore off drama for life." Joyce chuckled, locking the door. "Maybe this time it'll pay off for someone else." Mimi crossed her arms. "You know, with everything that happened, it wouldn't surprise me if they make a movie out of it one day." "Oh, God forbid." Mimi smirked. "Maybe they'll play you one day." Joyce's smile softened. "I already had my spotlight," she said quietly. "Didn't need cameras for it." The two women stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the afternoon crowd drift through the old district. Parents with strollers, teens with iced coffees, couples hand in hand. Life, ordinary and unfiltered, was still happening. Eventually, Blake's familiar pickup pulled up to the curb. He leaned out the window, sunglasses reflecting the bright desert sun. "You two planning to solve world peace out here? Or can I steal my mom for lunch?" Mimi laughed. "Take her before she adopts a pottery studio." Joyce waved her off and climbed in. "No phones," Blake said as they drove. "Promise me." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you grounding me now?" "Consider it mutual detox," he said, smiling. They ended up at a small roadside diner outside town, one of those places with mismatched chairs and a menu laminated so many times, the edges curled. Joyce ordered black coffee and a BLT. Blake got pancakes the size of dinner plates. They talked about everything but Sienna, the weather, the fun she'd started, Mimi's plans for the bakery's rebranding, even the Cardinals' lousy defense this season. When the check came, Blake grabbed it before she could. "My turn," he said. "You've paid enough for my lessons lately." She laughed, shaking her head. "I'll let you think that." Afterward, they drove up to the overlook just outside the city, the place Joyce used to take him when he was a kid, where the desert stretched endless and golden. They sat on the hood of his truck, paper cups of coffee in hand, the sky bruising into purples and pinks. The lights of Scottsdale blinked faintly in the distance, A constellation of stories she'd helped shape but didn't need to control anymore. For the first time in a long time, Joyce felt grounded, like the world had shifted back into its proper orbit. Blake glanced over, his expression easy. You ever regret any of it? Joyce took her time answering. The desert breeze whispered through the mesquite trees, carrying the faint smell of rain. No, she said finally, not a second. Because I learned something from all of it. He tilted his head. Yeah? What's that? She smiled, her eyes glinting in the amber light of the setting sun. That she called me low class. But I had something she could never rent. Roots. The sun dipped below the horizon, the last of the light washing her face in gold. Blake leaned back on the hood beside her, quiet, content. Down in the city, the lights flickered on one by one, and the wind carried the faintest hint of laughter. Real, unforced, alive. Joyce closed her eyes, let it fill her lungs, and thought, this is what victory sounds like. She called me low class, but I had something she could never rent. Roots.